The city never slept, but Arlen felt it had forgotten how to dream. Neon lights shimmered through his apartment window, bending across puddles formed by an early evening rain. Below, cars flowed like veins of gold through the dark, but he sat unmoving on the edge of his bed, wrists pressed against his knees, watching a bead of water slide down the glass. He told himself he liked the quiet. Lies often began that way, small comforts disguised as control. But silence wasn't absence here, it was weight. Every wall hummed faint echoes he didn't understand, like a life that had been spoken in this room once but erased before his return. 8 months since the accident, the doctor said. 8 months since the car was recovered half submerged by the East Side Bridge, with him miraculously alive but sans memory. He remembered fragments. The smell of petrichor. A necklace of glass beads. A voice saying his name, soft but urgent, Arlen. Everything else was an empty corridor with lights flickering in intervals. He lifted one of his recent sketches, an abstract building design he had no recollection of drafting. The architectural shapes curved strangely, fingers of steel bending toward invisible constellations. It looked less like a structure, more like someone trying to capture a memory in geometry. Work had always come naturally. Memory didn't. He built skyscrapers, bridges, entryways, but felt nothing while doing it, as though the purpose had been left behind in another timeline. His doctor suggested he journal each night, but all his entries began the same: I woke up again today. I think the city knows more than I do. The rain deepened. He stepped out that evening, unable to bear the heavy hum of the walls, and walked toward the river bridge. Lanterns along the way left trails of light reflecting on the wet pavement. Arlen watched strangers pass, each face a mystery that might have been known once. 2 blocks down stood a small cafe called Marrow, a place he frequented despite not remembering when the habit began. Its front window glowed amber, alive with warmth and faint jazz humming from a dusty speaker. Usual, Mr. Vale, the barista asked. He nodded automatically. The name still felt borrowed. Vale, they said, was his family name, found in his apartment lease documents. The woman at the counter smiled without prying further. Busy tonight, she said. Seems the rain makes company of its own, he replied, almost surprised by his own words. When the bell above the door chimed, he looked up, and froze. A woman entered, hurriedly folding a transparent umbrella. Her coat dripped quiet streams onto the tiled floor. She glanced around briefly, searching for an empty table, and in that instant, Arlen felt a sharp pulse behind his eyes, as if the room had shifted forward in time. He knew that face. No, not the details, the presence. Something in the way she brushed hair from her cheek sparked an ache deeper than recognition. She took a seat opposite the window, near the shelf of succulents. For a moment, the city outside dimmed, leaving only her reflection on the glass framed by the moving lights. Arlen looked away. The taste of his coffee had gone metallic. Don't stare, he told himself. He'd done this before, mistaking déjà vu for reality. His therapist said the mind tried to fill broken pieces with shadow desires. But when she caught his gaze, she didn't look startled or curious. She smiled. Softly. Like she'd found something, not someone. A memory trembled awake inside him, smoke, laughter, rain cascading down a windshield. The same smile faintly illuminated by oncoming headlights. He blinked, and it was gone. She left before he could approach her. Arlen found only a wet napkin on the table, where she doodled something faint with coffee, an arc of dots, almost like stars arranged into a pattern. He folded it and slipped it into his pocket. For the first time in months, his pulse raced for a reason other than confusion. The next day, work failed to distract him. He stared at blueprints that refused to cooperate. Every structure bent toward the curve she had drawn, those quiet sequences of dots that called to him like coordinates. That evening, the sky fractured again, water spilling from clouds like unspent grief. Arlen returned to the cafe, though he told himself it was for the atmosphere. He sat 3 tables away from the window, watching the rain distort the lights. Hours passed. She didn't come. But when he turned to leave, he spotted a figure beneath the overhang outside, her, standing under the same transparent umbrella. The rain formed halos around her outline. She wasn't looking at him, she was staring at the reflection of the bridge lights across the river. He stepped closer, words half-formed. She spoke first. Do you ever feel the city is replaying something you forgot? Her voice was soft, crystalline. He almost answered without realizing. Every day. That made her smile again, gentler this time. Then maybe we're both in the same loop. He wanted to ask what she meant, but the light turned red at the crosswalk, and the noise swallowed the moment. When it cleared, she was already walking away, blending into the current of umbrellas. That night, Arlen couldn't sleep. The faint hum of rain through the window became the echo of piano keys, slow, incomplete notes that seemed to trail after one another like memories reaching. He woke at dawn having drawn something unconsciously, the bridge, reflected upside down, forming a perfect circle with the river. Beneath it, he wrote, "When two halves remember, the world begins again." He didn't remember writing it. Outside, the first light of morning bled through the fog, pale and trembling. The city stirred, unaware of its own haunting. Arlen looked at the napkin next to his sketch. The coffee dots shimmered faintly where the light struck them, almost as if the paper itself was remembering the rain. The next few days arrived quietly, each identical to the one before. Morning coffee. Unfinished sketches. City sounds bleeding through half-open windows. But hidden beneath all that ordinariness was a hum, a quiet vibration guiding Arlen towards something unnamed. He replayed that moment outside the cafe again and again, her voice folding into the rainfall, words that seemed meant for him alone. Maybe we're both in the same loop. He didn't know her, yet her absence now felt heavier than most memories he actually owned. The rain returned on Thursday evening, and with it, something pulled him outside again, not logic, but instinct. He walked for miles through the heartbeat of the city, neon signs flickering like broken constellations, bus windows reflecting clouds where stars should have been, puddles opening like portals beneath streetlights. And there she was. The same coat, the same transparent umbrella, standing by a row of lampposts near the library fountain. The sound of the rain softened there, as if the city itself was listening. "You came," she said, almost surprised. "I could say the same," he replied. "Do you follow strangers often?" Her tone carried a smile, not mockery, but curiosity. "Only when they feel familiar." For the first time, she laughed, a light, fragile sound that trembled in the air. "I suppose that makes us both foolish." They shared a bench beneath the awning. The space between them filled not with words but the rhythm of rain hitting concrete. "I never got your name," he said softly. "Elira," she answered. "It means, the one who remembers. At least, that's what my mother used to say." "Do you?" She hesitated. "Not everything. But sometimes, I feel I remember things I shouldn't, places I've never been, people I've never met." She looked at him then, gaze steady but distant. Like déjà vu inside a heartbeat. Something deep in him responded to that. He didn't admit it, but he felt the same, as though life had misplaced him. They met again a week later. Then again after that. Patterns began forming naturally, without confession or decision. Sometimes they met at the cafe, other times by the river bridge, where the glow of city lights turned the water silver. Elira never talked about her personal life, never mentioned where she lived, and Arlen didn't press. What mattered was how their quiet moments filled the hollow spaces inside him. She carried a small notebook wherever she went, often sketching circles or lines mid-conversation. Once, when he asked what she was drawing, she smiled. "Echoes," she said. Arlen didn't understand, but her answer soothed him. It was the kind of honesty he had stopped expecting from life, cryptic but sincere. Sometimes she would hum faint melodies that made him shiver, though he couldn't say why. One evening, sitting beside her as she hummed by the bridge, fragments of imagery slipped into his mind, headlights, wind, the sound of her laughter in a confined space. Then nothing, just the echo of metal striking water. He jolted awake from that trance, breath uneven. "Arlen," she asked. "I think," he began, rubbing his temples. "I think I've heard that tune before." "You have," she whispered. "We both have." The next morning, he found an old digital recorder buried in one of his desk drawers. Its battery long dead, its surface worn. On it, barely legible, someone had written, 4E. He turned it over in his hand for what felt like an hour before sliding it into his pocket. That evening, he brought it with him to the bridge. When he arrived, she was already there. Tonight she wasn't wearing her usual coat, instead, a pale sweater that seemed to blend into the fog. The rain hadn't started yet, but the air smelled wet, charged, unsettled. "I found something," he said. Her eyes widened when she saw the recorder. For the briefest flicker in her expression, something raw surfaced: fear, recognition, grief. "You shouldn't," she began, then stopped herself. "Do you remember where you got that?" "I don't." "Then don't play it." "Why not?" She bit her lip, gaze falling toward the water. "Because sometimes remembering hurts more than forgetting." But Arlen pressed play. Static sputtered, then a soft tone, a piano piece, faint but unmistakable. The same melody she had hummed. And layered beneath the music, muffled laughter. His own voice. Hers. A rush of rain. Tires skidding. Then the crash. Silence. The recorder slipped from his hand into the river. He couldn't speak. The sound still rang inside his skull, a fragile bell that wouldn't stop trembling. "I told you," she murmured. "Some echoes should be left alone." He looked at her, desperate. What was that? Who were we to each other? She didn't answer, not directly. Love isn't gone when memory is. It's just waiting for a place to return to. In the following days, Arlen wandered the city compulsively, following impulses that led him nowhere. He began noticing certain details: the smell of specific streets, the curve of particular park benches, all strangely familiar. The world felt alive with déjà vu, as if the city itself held their lost moments. He stopped drawing buildings altogether and started sketching fragments: a girl beneath the rain, a bridge caught in fog, the reflection of two silhouettes sharing an umbrella. Each sketch bled into the next, forming an unfinished mosaic of remembrance. He pinned them across his apartment walls, an improvised mural of existence without explanation. When he stepped back, the designs formed something uncanny, the same circular shape Elira always drew in her notebook. It wasn't random. It was geometry repeating itself across emotion. That night, thunder broke the sky open. The rain came fierce and unrelenting. Arlen felt a pull, wordless but commanding. He ran toward the bridge. She was waiting. No umbrella this time. The rain soaked her hair to her shoulders, her expression calm, almost serene. "I knew you'd come," she said through the roar of water. "What are you?" "A memory. A ghost." She stepped closer, water pooling around their feet, streetlights blurring into halos behind her. "Does it matter? You found me because part of you remembered how." "I don't understand." "You don't have to. Just listen." Once more. From somewhere unseen, she lifted a small music box, rusted silver, small enough to fit in her palm. She opened it, and the same melody streamed into the night. Arlen froze. The memory came sharp this time. The night of the accident. The music box sitting on the car dashboard. Her laughter just before the skid. His hand reaching for hers. Her scream. Water flooding the world. He whispered, trembling, "Elira. I killed you." Her eyes softened. "No. You saved me. Just not the way you thought." She reached for his hand, cold meeting warm. Through that contact, images flooded his mind: hospital lights, doctors pulling his body from wreckage, the hollow sound of her name echoing between walls. "You couldn't let go," she said. "And I couldn't move on. So I stayed in the rain, where the world resets itself every time memory falls." The streetlights flickered, their glow bending into spirals of color. The air thickened, heavy with storm and electricity. He tried to hold her closer, but his hand passed through light instead of skin. Her voice began to fade with the rain's crescendo. "When you wake, remember the sound of this storm. It will guide you home." Then she was gone. Arlen collapsed to his knees, the music box still playing in his palm, its song ending on a single trembling note. He didn't remember falling asleep there by the river, but when he woke at dawn, the world was completely still, and the music box rested beside him, dry, untouched by rain. Morning came slowly, with the kind of quiet that feels wrong. The rain had stopped, but the city looked washed out, colors pale, edges softened. Arlen sat at the end of his bed, the music box resting between his palms. Every time he turned the key, it played the same melody without falter, as if defying time itself. he couldn't tell if the night before had been real. The streets bore no sign of flooding, no overturned bins, no trace of chaos. Only the faint scent of ozone in the air. Maybe grief had stitched dreams into his consciousness again. Or maybe dreams were simply how lost love spoke when the world wasn't listening. He opened his sketchbook. The pages were stained from rain but still legible. There was a new sketch that he couldn't recall drawing, a hand reaching through a window, fingertips touching a reflection. Beneath it, in precise handwriting, 3 words were written. Find her name. He frowned. Her name, he murmured aloud. Elira already told me her name. But somehow, he knew that wasn't what the message meant. He spent the afternoon walking through the archives near the city's old district, a building he'd only visited once before, years ago, though he had no memory of it. Dust latticed the shelves, and paper whispered beneath every step. The librarian, a kind elderly man with half-moon spectacles, raised his brow at Arlen's request for local accident reports. Recent or historical? 8 months ago, Arlen replied. The East Bridge accident. Car submerged near River West. The men shuffled through old databases. We don't usually have people asking for these unless they're journalists. I lost someone, Arlen said simply. The librarian's eyes softened. I'm sorry. Hold on. He vanished into a row of cabinets and returned minutes later with a file. Arlen unsealed it with hesitant fingers. Accident log, River West Bridge. 2 victims, Arlen Vale, 30. Survived with minor injuries. Passenger, Elira Wren, 28. Deceased at hospital arrival. He reread her name over and over until the page blurred. Wren. It didn't feel final, it felt like a door creaking open, just far enough to glimpse light. That night, he searched Elira's name online until sunrise. There were scattered traces, a short obituary in a local newsletter, an unfinished blog about piano and memory therapy, and a photo from 2 years ago, her standing in front of a classroom, hands poised above keys, smiling at children. She'd lived here. She'd been real. So why was she still appearing in the rain? He closed his eyes, replaying her words, love isn't gone when memory is. It's just waiting for a place to return to. He wondered if maybe he wasn't haunted at all, maybe he was the one haunting her. The next evening, Arlen visited the music school from the photo. The building stood near the old tram line, tucked beside a garden of stubborn ivy and cracked tiles. Inside, dust motes hovered like suspended time. The school had been closed for months, a faded note taped to the door, pending renovation. He slipped inside through an unlocked back gate. In the main hall, the faint scent of rain lingered, though the place had been sealed. Pianos stood idle beneath white sheets, a quiet cemetery of song. He brushed one open and pressed a key. The sound resonated, soft, imperfect, trembling with life. And then, for the first time, he smelled her perfume, light, almost floral. He turned. She was there, standing by the window, eyes luminous with something between peace and sadness. Elira, he breathed, voice breaking. She smiled faintly. You found my name. How are you here? Because you remembered. I didn't. You did enough. Her tone carried warmth, not accusation. Every line you drew, every song you couldn't stop hearing, every walk in the rain, you kept me alive inside your search. Tears pressed behind his eyes. You said I saved you, but how? By remembering the love that existed before the pain. She stepped closer. Do you know why we were on the bridge that night? He froze. The question opened a door he hadn't known still existed. No. Her gaze softened, voice quiet. You were leaving the city. You'd accepted a project overseas, something huge, something that could have made your career. I didn't want you to go. A flicker of guilt twisted in his chest. So we fought. She shook her head. We didn't. You promised to stay if I asked you to. And I couldn't, I didn't want to be the reason your world became small. But love has its contradictions, doesn't it? That night, we decided to drive to the river to watch the lights. You said we couldn't part on silence. Her eyes shimmered with memory. You turned to tell me something. I never heard what it was before the tires screamed. Arlen's breath hitched. I was going to ask you to come with me. Elira smiled, tears glistening. Then you already kept your promise. The piano beside them vibrated faintly, a single key pressing down though no one had touched it. A small gust drifted through the cracked window, bringing with it the scent of petrichor. You can't stay here, she said softly. There's more to build, Arlen. You've been mapping grief instead of life. He stepped closer, desperate. I can't lose you again. You won't. Her voice steadied, serene. You just have to understand where I went. She looked toward the ceiling, where rain began tracing faint patterns on the glass panels, curling shapes forming a perfect circle, the same one from her drawings. Her hand brushed his cheek like mist dissolving in morning air. This city isn't replaying memories, Arlen. It's replaying love. Every storm is our beginning. That's why I return when it rains, because that's where we left off. He closed his eyes, tears breaking free. The room trembled as thunder whispered in the distance. If the rain stops, will you disappear? No, she said. I'll just rest where you've already carried me, in every design you make, in every rhythm the world gives you. That's where I'll wait. When he opened his eyes, she was gone again, leaving behind only the faint circle traced in condensation on the piano's lid. At its center was the music box, still playing. Arlen sat there, motionless, until dawn light bled into the hall. Then he stood, gathered his sketches into a pile, and began to draw, lines flowing not from memory but from love. The design that emerged was unlike anything he had ever created, a towering arc of glass embedded with spiral curves, open at the top so that when it rained, the water would run through hidden channels, producing sound. Music. A building that could sing. He knew what he would name it, Elira Hall. Months later, when the first rains of spring returned, the completed structure rose against the skyline. People gathered beneath its canopy as the drizzle began, hearing the soft melody of falling water echoing through hollow steel. Strangers looked upward, smiling without knowing why. And in that hidden resonance, somewhere within that sound, Arlen heard her again, a voice like starlight through fog. You found me, Arlen. That's all I ever wanted. He didn't reply. He simply stood there, letting the rain soak through his clothes, lifting his face toward a sky that no longer felt empty. The sky over the city had learned to sing. Months had passed since Elira Hall opened, and every storm now drew crowds that stood quietly, faces lifted to the softened echoes of rain weaving through glass tunnels. The building transformed water into melody, the random into symphony. To everyone else, it was a marvel of design, proof of Arlen Vale's genius. To him, it was an unfinished letter still being written by the sky. He stood alone on the rooftop one evening, overseeing the rain's threads glowing under streetlight halos. The melody changed with the wind. Tonight it was slower, almost tender. He closed his eyes and let the sound pulse through him, music shaped like memory. He whispered to the drifting air, "You'd laugh at this, wouldn't you? You said I made buildings that tried too hard to feel." Somewhere deep in the tower's echo, he swore he heard that familiar laugh again. "I finally built something that breathes," he said softly. "Maybe that's enough." Arlen's life began to move again, gently, without haste. He taught design students at a nearby university, walked to work instead of driving, grew herbs on his balcony. Yet even in quiet routine, he carried a sense of communion with something unseen. Not haunting, connection. Every rainfall brought new melodies through Elira Hall's veins, and each sound seemed subtly different, as though she were still speaking, adjusting, composing. He noticed small details others missed. One day, the reflection of the hall's glass made a perfect ring of light across the river, their promised circle, drawn skyward at last. One evening, years later, Arlen was invited to present at an international architecture symposium. The event took place abroad, the very project he had once planned to leave the city for, the one fate had interrupted. He hesitated when the letter arrived. Leaving felt like opening an old wound. But then he looked out at the rain-speckled city and smiled. Elira's words echoed, "There's more to build, Arlen." And so, he went. The conference hall was vast, impersonal, humming with conversations in languages he only half understood. When his turn came, he presented not blueprints but the story of Elira Hall, how the structure was designed to harmonize with chaos, how even stormwater could be transformed into something beautiful when guided by memory. The audience watched silently as the screen projected images of the building glowing through rainfall. Every line, he told them, voice steady, was designed to remind me that memory is not meant to trap us, it's meant to translate us. What we love never truly disappears. It only waits for us to build a space wide enough for it to exist again. When the room erupted in quiet applause, it wasn't pride he felt. It was peace, a weight finally lifting from the soul. That night, as he walked through unfamiliar city streets, rainfall began again. He stood beneath a narrow awning, listening. There was no Elira hall here, no architecture to catch the water's song. Yet faintly, between the drops, he heard it, her melody, unmistakable and whole. He followed the sound instinctively through winding alleys until it stopped before a small bookstore glowing with golden light. Inside stood a young woman arranging music scores behind the counter. She looked up as he entered. "Sorry, we're about to close," she began, then froze, her gaze locking on him as though seeing through years. Her eyes were not exactly Elira's, but they held that same quiet recognition, that same warmth shaped by something that had lived before. For a moment neither spoke. Soft thunder rolled across the horizon. "Do you need help finding something?" she asked gently. "Yes," he said after a pause. "But I think it might have just found me." She smiled, a small, uncertain smile that felt like home unfolding again. Outside, the rain fell harder, carrying that familiar music only he could hear. It whispered through the pavements, through reflections, through everything time hadn't broken. Months later, the woman, her name was Elira, coincidentally close yet not the same, became a part of his quiet routine. She loved old sheet music, coffee too sweet for reason, and storms. They never spoke of memories, never mentioned ghosts, yet sometimes, in silence, she would hum fragments of a melody that slipped unbidden between them. He would look up then, smile faintly, and say, "You have a musician's heart." And she would laugh, replying, "Maybe I'm just echoing something I haven't learned yet." In those moments, he understood. Love doesn't always return in its original form. Sometimes it rewrites itself through new faces, carrying the same light, the same language of rain. And maybe that was what Elira had meant all along. Love doesn't end, it expands. Years later, a plaque was added to Elira Hall, its inscription simple. "For the one who remembered when I could not. For the rain that sings what words forget." On the day of its unveiling, rain fell again over the city. Visitors gathered under umbrellas as the building sang its haunting melody. High above them, Arlen stood beneath the overhang, hair silvered, eyes bright despite the years. He whispered into the downpour, "I did finish my map. And you were right, time doesn't end things. It remakes them." The wind carried his voice across the glass, blending with rain until both became one sound, a harmony of memory and renewal. In that sound, just beneath the notes, a whisper answered back. "And you finally fixed time, my love."